Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and first of all, I am sorry if I seem a little bit low energy today. I have the worst headache and I still wanted to film because you didn't get a video on Sunday. I probably won't be able to upload a video this Sunday as well, so I just wanted to sit down, get a video out and so on. Also, sorry if you can hear a lot of noise today. Because of my headache, I have to have my window wide open because I need the fresh air so much. So yeah, just sorry for all those things, but let's get into today's video. Today is going to be my second video in a row that isn't gonna be book focused, but is gonna be TV show focused. After my full season review of Sandman last week, this week we're gonna talk about my first impressions on House of the Dragons of the first episode. This won't be spoiler free. I mean, I will talk a bit about my spoiler free thoughts at the very beginning, but mostly there's some very specific things I want to go into in terms of first impressions and why, to be honest, I don't have my hopes up very high so far for this series, for this season, and yeah, I shouldn't be surprised, to be honest, but we'll get into it. Before I get into my thoughts though, if you have seen any of my adaptation reviews before, you know that I like to go a little bit into my history with the original books, shows, whatever. And in terms of Game of Thrones, you all know I read the books and I really enjoy the books. I am currently doing my reread of A Game of Thrones. Originally I had intended to be done with my reread of A Song of Ice and Fire and to have read Fire and Blood by the time House of the Dragon came out, but it wasn't to be, so you know, whatever. So because of that, while I have read A Song of Ice and Fire and while I have read parts of the, you know, the world of A Song of Ice and Fire book, big ass thing, I have not read Of Fire and Blood, which I believe is the book that deals with, you know, at least some of the stuff that's gonna happen in the show. And so I do know some of the characters, I do know some of the backgrounds, but honestly I forgot most of the characters already, so I'm going into this show basically blind. As far as my history with the TV show, I, to be honest, started the first season before I read the first book. I did not get through the first season. I think I stopped at episode 8 or something. I ended up being really bored, not really liking any of the characters, so I stopped watching the show and only started watching it again, rewatching the first season and then continuing on to, I think, season 5 after I had read the books. And then I took a break until just before season 8 came out, and then I just binged season 6, 7 and a lot of season 8, but I never finished season 8. I think I gave up after the fight with the White Walkers because things just got too stupid for me, to be honest. And so with that being my history with the Game of Thrones so far, I went into this first episode both hesitant as well as excited somewhat because I thought the trailers looked really good. There was some hesitancy because there were some possibly misunderstandings on the topic of sexual assault and sexual violence within the show, if it's gonna be depicted, if it's not gonna be depicted, and so on. So yeah, that was something that made me very hesitant because, as you all know, I have talked about that in multiple videos already. I still need to make a dedicated video on it though. I have very strong feelings on sexual violence within stories and how I think sexual violence should be handled. Not in terms of there is one specific way that is the right way to handle sexual violence in shows or gendered violence in shows, but in terms of it's just a very, very touchy subject and I think it needs to be handled with great care, which has not always, almost never been done in the original Game of Thrones TV show. But now in terms of spoiler-free thoughts for the first episode, to be honest, I found it kind of boring. Like, the plot-wise, there wasn't really that much that made me think, ooh, I need to continue watching or whatever. Like, there was some setup to some exciting stuff in the future, but aside from that, I don't know, it didn't give me the bang that I really want from a first episode. So yeah, in terms of that, it felt fun, and it felt like something that is probably very exciting for fans of the TV show, like of the original Game of Thrones TV show. But for me, who wasn't really a fan of the original show, I was like, yeah, it was fine, I guess. I'm gonna continue watching, but it wasn't an episode that made me, you know, sad that this isn't a show where all episodes are just published at once on a streaming service, but where it comes weekly. Part of the reason why it was like that for me was also a very specific scene that also has already been thoroughly discussed on the internet, on Twitter, on different forums. And yeah, I'm gonna talk about it more in the spoiler section of this video, but I just thought that while there was not sexual violence within this first episode, I just thought that it really showed that the showrunners just don't understand gendered violence in general. And yeah, I just really wasn't happy with that scene. The things I did enjoy about this first episode were generally the performances of the actors and actresses. I especially really liked Rhaenyra's actress performance. Also Matt Smith, is that his name? You know, the Doctor Who actor. I thought he did a pretty good job so far as Daemon Targaryen. Aside from that, yeah, there wasn't really that much standout yet, to be honest, for me. And the other thing I really enjoyed were, of course, the costumes. I mean, we're already used to stellar costumes from A Game of Thrones. Once again, really great costumes. The one thing I would maybe criticize a little bit is that the costumes are just very similar to A Game of Thrones, which, on the one hand, understandable. It's set in the same world, you kind of want to build a visual through line, but also there's like 300 years in between the two shows. So I don't know, I just would have liked there to be some more of a visual difference, although I did think that there was a bit of a visual difference in terms of King's Landing and in terms of the setting. Other visuals that I did not like that much is, I don't know why, but I felt like the CGI on the dragon in this first episode was worse than the CGI on the dragons in A Game of Thrones. Could be that they just have to have a lot more CGI in this show because there's a lot more dragons, and because of that, you know, they can't put as much effort into the single dragons. But yeah, it was still stellar. It was still better than like all CGI in any other current fantasy shows, or most other current fantasy shows. Way better than the CGI in The Witcher or Wheel of Time. But yeah, I just noticed that the dragon seemed a bit more fake and a bit more, you know, put into the framing of the shot. So yeah, that's just a little nitpick. And then the last thing, maybe they'll come in the future still, but this first episode just really seemed to me, I mean, I get it because, you know, that's the main audience they're going for. I don't think they're really going for, you know, finding a new audience. Their audience is gonna be Game of Thrones fans. But in terms of a setup of a first episode, it just really felt like you had to have already seen the original Game of Thrones, because there was just nothing explained about who anyone is or anything. Also, the episode started with narration. I don't like narration. Like, couldn't you have done it differently? But aside from that bit of narration at the very beginning, there were basically no explanations. There were no explanations who Daemon is, for example. I mean, we know he's the brother of the king, but, you know, some more of his background and so on, we didn't really get that. We're probably gonna get that in the future. And there was just no explanation whatsoever in terms of the houses. What does it mean to be the hand of the king and so on. So yeah, those were my spoiler-free thoughts in terms of the first episode. Now we'll get into my spoiler-free thoughts, which, to be honest, are two main thoughts. Maybe three main thoughts. And most of the spoilery stuff, I have to say, is negative, so yeah, be aware of that. Also, trigger warning for this first episode for, and some people are gonna consider it as a spoiler probably, but trigger warning for loss of bodily autonomy and forced C-section, because yeah, that's the main thing that I just really didn't like about this first episode, that a lot of people criticized, and very rightly. And I don't know, it was one of those things where I just don't like that argument, and I'm one of the first people where I'm like, it's fantasy, it's whatever, you know, especially when it comes to a lot of different media. You don't have to like everything, and just because you don't like something does not have to mean it's problematic. You can dislike things without having to find a reason why it's problematic, and so you're actually in the right for disliking it, and everyone who likes it is wrong. I don't like that type of thinking. However, I also saw a lot of defense of the forced C-section scene of, I forgot what, I think it was like Emma or something, the king's wife's forced C-section, that, you know, it's gruesome and unsettling, and you can think it's gruesome and unsettling and too gruesome and too unsettling for you without that having to mean that that scene is problematic or not well made or whatever. And I disagree in this regard with the whole, you know, you don't have to make everything problematic to dislike it, because I do think that scene is problematic. First of all, because it's once again one of the laziest writing tricks ever. It's the fridging of a wife, it's the fridging of a mother. I don't know why writers still use that trope. Like, it's one of the few tropes that is universally acknowledged as being bad, because it's just bad writing, because usually it's about a character that you have just met and that you don't care about, and then it's also used to, you know, push forward the story of other characters that at this point we also haven't met yet, or haven't properly met yet, and also don't care about. And then the second thing is that despite all the acknowledgements that the original Game of Thrones TV show had a lot of sexual violence and a lot of gendered violence, and that this violence will not be portrayed. I mean, there was like a misunderstanding if it's gonna be portrayed anyways or if it's not gonna be portrayed, but I think in the end it was like, no, we're not gonna portray it because we want to, like, it's gonna be there in the show, but it's not gonna be graphic, because we want to deal with it in a proper way and to give it the respect it deserves. Apparently other forms of gendered violence do not deserve that, what's it called, you know, thoughtfulness, because the C-section was brutal and it was voyeuristic, and it just was not necessary. Just absolutely not necessary. And yes, I get a Game of Thrones and now House of the Dragons is gonna be a very bloody and brutal show, but like, the brutality at the tourney was less than the brutality of this forced C-section of this birth. Like, the tourney was somehow less bloody and less graphic than the C-section, and I'm sorry, but there's just something wrong with that. And it's not just how graphic the scene was, it is also using the loss of bodily autonomy without acknowledging this loss of bodily autonomy. Like, it does not come up again. We never even get a scene, for example, where Viserys is confronted by Rhaenyra or someone about the decision he made. It's just there to be brutal and to be gruesome, and so we can see a woman being just absolutely violated and to push forward the plot. Like, the plot of other characters. And I just really didn't like the scene, and this scene honestly made me just really not excited for the future of the show, because yeah, hated it. Anyway, the two other things I didn't really like was, first of all, I found it was really weird, you know, the callbacks to Game of Thrones, or like call forwards, I guess, because this is a prequel series. And it's just, even if those lines of dialogue do appear in the book, there was this line where Viserys talks to Rhaenyra about the long night, and how at the point of the long night a Targaryen has to sit on the throne of the Seven Kingdoms, which first of all didn't happen when the long night didn't actually happen. So like, what was the point of having this callback to a Game of Thrones and remember Daenerys helping with the White Walkers or whatever? Just did not make sense. And then I had one last thing that I forgot what I wanted to talk about. I think just Viserys in general is pretty weird, but maybe he's gonna be set up differently in the future. Like, something about him and who he is as a king just seemed off, but I'm hoping we're gonna get more characterization from him in the future. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, I guess, in terms of first impressions, is that if they are queer baiting us, then I am going to be so mad, because yeah, which I assume they're queer baiting us, but whatever. So yeah, that was it on my thoughts on the first episodes of House of the Dragons. If you have seen this first episode, share your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media, as well as to my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, where I read one adult high fantasy book written by a woman or genderqueer person per month, will be left linked down below, so go and check those out. And I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!